There are so many myths when it comes to offshore tax savings, both saying that you can't do it, which isn't true, and both saying how easy it is, which often isn't true. But doubly so for Americans who have one of the world's most complicated tax systems. And so in this video, I'm going to slay 7 offshore tax myths for Americans. Hi guys, I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you want to learn how the Nomad Capitalist team can personally help you create a holistic offshore plan to go offshore, keep more of your own money, and go where you're treated best, learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Let's talk about 7 tax myths that just won't die. And number 1 is one that I've started hearing a lot more recently, and that is that Americans can no longer save on taxes by going offshore. This simply isn't true. We've made videos on this before. People keep saying it. And that is that, hey, there's some new laws out there, and the way it works now, there's no benefit. All you can get is the foreign earned income exclusion. And if you're making any kind of serious money, you can't save on tax. Now, let's talk about the part that is true. The U.S. tax system is one that is very unique. It is a citizenship-based tax system where no matter where you live, you are subject to it. That does not mean that you necessarily have to pay anything. Most of the 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs that we're talking to will be paying something, but it also doesn't mean that you're paying necessarily full boat. What it does mean is that proper planning is needed. You want to do things legally. They call me the goody two-shoes of the offshore industry because I'm very focused on legally doing things conservatively. But there's still an opportunity for substantial savings for Americans. No one video can cover everyone's particular situation, whether you're making 50 grand or $50 million a year. We've seen all the different scenarios. Everyone's different, but there are still opportunities for substantial savings. Now, myth number 2. Let's go the other direction. Myth number 2. You don't have to file a tax return if you live overseas. Not true. Why is that? Well, citizenship-based taxation. Americans, U.S. citizens, really U.S. persons, as we call them, U.S. persons, are required to file on their worldwide income. Okay, that means that if you have a bank account overseas, chances are you're going to need to report that. Income is going to need to be reported. Okay, so you're going to want to file your tax return. I'm not here to give tax advice. You want to have a tax preparer, of course, but there's no exemption to filing simply because you're overseas. Myth number 3 is, okay, I understand I need to file, but I'm claiming the foreign earned income exclusion. That's the exclusion where you can exempt a little over $100,000 in income that you earn, i.e. a salary that you earn while overseas. Whether it's from your own company or you're doing freelance work or you have a job, whatever it may be, you can exclude that from your income. And so, the myth goes, I don't need to file if I'm claiming that. Absolutely, you do need to file, and you need to specifically claim that. So you want to make sure that you're getting your foreign earned income exclusion. The IRS does not always like it. If you just ignore them and later come back and say, oh yeah, actually I meant to claim that, it may not always work. So you want to file regardless. Again, not tax advice, but get with a preparer. Make sure that you're not falling into this trap where you thought you were exempt. Even if you don't owe anything, you probably want to file. Myth number 4, this is the big one. Offshore income is not reported on your tax return, okay? This is one that's been around for a long time. And actually, this one does not just apply to folks in the United States. It applies to folks in most Western countries, okay? So where the U.S. has a citizenship-based tax system, most Western countries have what's called a residential-based tax system, which means if your place of residence, your tax residence is in that country, they tax your worldwide income, often subject to certain credits or treaties or things like that. So if you live in the United States, also if you live in the UK, Australia, etc., and you have income from other countries, that has to be reported and you have to pay the tax. Okay? And so the downside for an American, for example, is that even if they live overseas, they have to do this. Okay, but certainly if you live in the United States, let's say you have an investment property in Dubai, okay, and you have income from that. Well, Dubai may not tax you, but the United States will certainly tax you on the difference. And again, if you live in London, then the UK will tax you on the difference. The difference is you can leave London, go and live in Dubai, and then you don't have to pay. Okay, that's where the two systems differ. But you absolutely do need to report offshore income. This also comes as confusion sometimes when people are talking to me about renouncing their citizenship and they need to declare their assets on Form 8854, the expatriation return. And they say, oh, U.S. assets? No, all of your worldwide assets. So the IRS wants to know all of your income. They want to know all of your assets. In a situation like when you're renouncing, it all goes into the same pot. The fact that you earned it offshore, now people say, oh, well, that's not fair. It's funny, even the people, and especially the people perhaps, who were like, Andrew, why should people not pay tax to the United States? And I say, because they don't live there, right? And they say, oh, come on, that's of course everyone should pay. And then you say, no, you must pay on everything. And they say, well, that's not fair. Of course it's not fair, but that's how it works. Myth number 4, you have to report all of your income, even if it was earned outside of the United States. Myth number 5 is that because of all these taxes, because of all this reporting, because of this worldwide presence, U.S. persons cannot open bank accounts offshore. That is not true. Now, it's something that it certainly is used by people in this business who want to make it sound really scary and really difficult. It's used by the advocates who want to go out and complain about the U.S. government. Listen, I think citizenship-based taxation is certainly unfair. It is what it is. Go where you're treated best means you find the best way to legally make your own path. And so there are plenty of banks that will accept U.S. citizens. Banks in Switzerland and Liechtenstein and a number of other places won't take U.S. citizens, but there are plenty of banks, especially banks in emerging countries, even banks in places like Singapore will take Americans. Sometimes they will limit the activities you can do, like you won't be able to open a full throttle investment account, or you won't be able to hold certain insurance products or do other things. It might just be a generic savings account or a generic transactional account. But there are plenty of countries, here at Nomad Capitalist, we keep a list of over 1,000 banks. We're updating it on a constant basis. Plenty of them take Americans. Many don't, but there are plenty that still do. And again, go where you're treated best is not meaning, crying over the ones that won't take you. It means simply finding the ones that will. And there are hundreds of banks that will accept U.S. persons, no problem. Now, myth number 6. This is interesting. This is about the IRS and them contacting you. I've had this come up a couple times where people think that the IRS is super duper efficient. Okay, they'll file a return and they're like a week later, I haven't heard anything, must be great. Same as with any tax authority, I think, in most countries. It can take them months or even sometimes years to catch up and let you know, hey, we found a mistake. Okay, so you want to obviously have a professional tax preparer do things. We've got a whole network of expat-focused tax preparers. If you're a U.S. citizen, you want to have someone who specializes in foreigners or in foreign transactions, right? Someone who understands all these rules. I had one of the best tax preparers, one of the best firms when I lived in Arizona. When I moved overseas, I had the most simple of questions they didn't know. I literally had to fight them. The 1 year I had them prepare my return, I literally had to fight them to qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion. They just didn't understand it. They thought I didn't qualify. I had to fight them, to beat them over the head. They finally said, actually, you're right. Okay, so you want to have someone who understands foreign because it's such a niche that if they don't understand it, you're going to make mistakes. I've seen other people who we've worked with get into trouble because their accountant didn't prepare everything properly. Sometimes they've had to have penalties abated, tens of thousands of dollars penalties. Get the right person. But anyway, that's important because if something is done wrong, it might take them years to catch up with you. And imagine how you'd feel if you had a couple penalties slapped against you and it was going on for 5 years because they never caught up with you. Okay, that can happen. So do things properly to make sure, understand this myth that the IRS or any tax agency is going to identify the error in your tax return a week after you file it and remedy it quickly. That's not often the case. Myth number 7 is if they do contact you, you should freak out and run for the hills. It's interesting that occasionally people do get stuff from the IRS, and sometimes it can be easily remedied. Again, if you're doing things properly to begin with, if you have the right structure, if you set up your affairs properly, sometimes it's just a matter of explaining it. One thing I often tell people is get a memorandum explaining the structure you're setting up or explaining the way that you're setting up your offshore affairs. Get it in writing when you do it and keep that in your files. It's going to cost you a little bit more to have the proper tax professionals get everything done for you in writing and give that to you. But it's going to be a lot easier when you get a knock on the door to simply say, hey, here's the advice I got, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, send that off. If everything's on the up and up, it may just resolve itself. That's going to be a lot easier than saying, well, I don't know what happened, when did I do what I did, I heard from so-and-so, they said this. That's not going to work as well. So myth number 7, don't expect that if you get asked any questions, it's the end of the world. But again, be prepared in advance. Pay a little bit extra. Get things in writing. Get it done professionally rather than just setting something up with cheap offshore companies.ru and expecting that everything will be great. Okay, so those are 7 myths that relate to offshore tax for Americans. It's a bit more work, it's a bit more complicated, but if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur, it's well worth it. If there's one that you think I missed, leave a comment below, and if you want to learn more, go to nomadcapitalist.com. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.